hearts and minds of young people. We're going to take this and go into churches and community centers and talk about what's happening in our community and hear your concerns. Let me stop just a second and talk about these synthetic drugs. You're going to hear more about it, and you're going to see some of the packages. Wayne, do you mind holding up some of the synthetic packages? Take a look at some of these packages. It looks like candy bars. It looks like candy that they're selling. SpongeBob on the front. You've got the Seven Dwarfs on the front of some of these packages. You've got Scooby-Doo on the front of it. One package is labeled with the title Scooby Snacks. You know, that's what these drug dealers are selling now. We're not just talking about pills. We're talking about these packages that look like bubblegum wrappers and candy bars. Wayne, you care to hold up the drugs themselves, the material? You'll hear more about this, but this is an example of some of the substances that's packaged in these little packages, these containers. They're marketed, as you can see, to young people. They're small, flashy, shiny wrappers. High profit margin for the drug dealers. And yet, when you think about the side effects, and you'll hear from somebody a lot smarter than me about what it does to you, you'll be just as enraged and appalled as I am. It changes the very brain chemistry of an individual that uses it just one time. Just one bit of this chemical that's mixed up with a bunch of... It's poison. It's poison. And yet it's being sold and pushed on our young people and told that it gives a high that can't be detected on a drug screen. I know the social workers in the room express their frustration about the effects that results from parents who consume these substances and then would rather get high than take care of their own kids. And as a parent, I find that just heart-wrenching. Then when you think about the effects, hallucination, highly addiction, sudden death, it's scary. We all know these substances are dangerous, but when you put it in real terms, and examples of cases in which there was a case in Florida in which a guy got high on some of these illegal, dangerous substances and attacked a homeless man and ate his face off. We've heard about the horror stories like that. We all need to make sure the public knows about this. Now, we take it seriously at our office. We have a policy that we treat synthetic drugs harsh, and we're going to continue to treat them harsh and seek long prison sentences for anyone who's trying to push these illegal drugs on our kids. My office will prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. We're already starting that process, and I want to recognize the contributions of our attorneys who are going the extra mile and working real hard. And Ken Lammers, I don't know if I didn't mention Ken earlier, did I? Yeah, okay. Ken came in, and sorry, Ken, I overlooked it earlier. You know, if a drug dealer is aggressively pushing these deceptive packages, these flashy packages to young people, and they're being aggressive with these harsh, dangerous substances that is poison. It's poisoning our community. So we have to be equally as harsh. And we're going to be that through the prosecutor's office. That's one side of the equation. We're also going to be aggressive by taking the message to the public, and that's what this program is about. These drugs we're told that they're potpourri, we're told that they're incense, we're told that they're bath salts. They're nothing of the sort. They're not tested in a lab somewhere. They're not FDA approved. They're dangerous. You'll hear more about that in a second. You can tell I get passionate about this. I'm upset because it's poisoning our community. We're trying to do something about it. So, I've gone on way too long, I'm sure. Let me thank the law enforcement folks for doing their job. Let me thank Chris Bryant for being with us, for doing her part of the program as well. And let me thank you all for being here as well. I'm going to stop and stop talking and move to the side and listen. But after we're done talking, I'm going to come back up. Teresa and I and Chris are going to allow, if you all have questions, we'll take a few moments of open discussion questions and allow you all to ask some questions. But before I do, you want me to introduce Chris? Okay, I'm going to try to make sure I get this right. So, Chris Bryant is a forensic scientist. Again, like I said, way smarter than I am. Okay? And there's a reason why I went to law school instead of science. She works for the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, out of the Western Regional State Laboratory, Forensic Laboratory. She's a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Roanoke College. Again, and she's worked in the lab since 1980. She's taught forensic science for over 10 years in Western Virginia Community College and has taught numerous programs like this, use and abuse of drugs, to various law enforcement groups. So welcome, Chris. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to stand aside and listen and stop talking. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight because this is an important message to get out to the community. And there's a lot of reasons which I hope this presentation will explain to you why it's so important to educate the community. Let's see, I'm sure I'll get this. Okay. Okay. There is great harm being done to the community because of these synthetic drugs. As you've been told, there's an effect on the community for not only the people that are involved in the use, abuse of the sale of them, but also of community members. And these are some examples of some of the things that have happened. In Louisiana in 2010, someone snorted bath salts, then their behavior became very erratic, they were despondent, and then they were terrified by the hallucinations, and he cut his own throat. There were people in Washington in 2011 where parents killed their own children, and then they went driving around until the police arrested them. And as you can see, then he shot his wife and then himself, and bath salts were found in the father's pockets. You certainly don't need to tell your children or others people about these stories, but you should have an understanding of the importance of these and the seriousness of these drugs. Okay, just as a little demonstration, can I have a volunteer come up? Does anybody want to help me with this? Okay. All right. This is a Tylenol PM. I bought it at the drugstore, and when I bought it, there was a foil protective cap on the top. Okay, and can you do the ingredients in there? I think it says
acetaminophen, 500 milligrams.
Right.
Diphenhydramine.
Right, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
25 milligrams.
25 minutes. Okay. Does it also say on there how many you should take? Maybe on this side. It says maybe you should take one or two.
You better reach the children.
Right. And well, yeah, and it's giving you precautions.
2 tablets at bedtime, 12 years and over.
Okay.
Do not use if you're under 12 years of age. Do not use it the full it's broken.
That's right. Okay. So there's a lot of information, but even this drug, which all of us can dangerous if somebody takes it inappropriately, takes too much of it, gives it to the wrong
Are you
age of
gonna
the child. Nope. Not yet. Okay, so these are considered non-controlled drugs that we can get in the drugstore, and they have purpose that when you have a headache or you can't sleep at night, you can get these. Okay. I got this prescription from my doctor because I have high blood pressure. Okay, and so I went to the pharmacy and picked it up, and can you just kind of read a little bit? What's on
100
the label?
milligram, it's low sartan,
Mhm.
and take one daily.
Okay. Okay.
May cause drowsiness or dizziness.
Yeah. So here again, this is something I got from my doctor's office. It is, he gave me the prescription for it. I got it at the pharmacy. So I can be pretty well assured what's in this bottle, because I trust my pharmacist, that it's losartan, and my doctor is giving it to me for my high blood pressure. Now, if you don't have high blood pressure, would you want to take these?
No.
Because if you don't have high blood pressure, if you take high blood pressure pills, that could
It
not
can
be
mess you
good.
up.
Yeah, it can mess you up. So even drugs that are prescribed by your doctor, for me, it's doing something good. If somebody who doesn't need this drug and the doctor hasn't prescribed it, it could do them harm. Okay. Now, can you read me the label on that? No? No. You don't see any instructions of how many to take?
No.
Do you see what it says is contained in there?
No.
Or what the precautions are that, is it dangerous to take? What is it? Should you be of a certain age or need, and do you think your doctor would give you something like this?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Well, this is where drug abuse. I've been testing drugs at the forensic lab for 35 years now. Don't do the math. And we started out getting drugs like this that most of the time were the ones that we heard about in movies and things like that. We sometimes they were heroin, sometimes it was methamphetamine, sometimes it was cocaine, and I kind of got a little bit ahead of myself. And we knew a little bit about them because some of these are Schedule II drugs, which are actually prescribed. Like methamphetamine used to be a prescription drug back in the 60s, and then they decided it wasn't such a good drug, but now it's being made clandestinely, and it's one of the drugs that we still see. And some people may know something about it. Well, now we're starting to get in drugs that are made outside of this country, and they've been known as K2, Spice, things like that, and almost all of them are labeled not for human consumption. And you might say, well, why are they putting that on there? Well, that's how they're getting around the laws in the United States that help control controlled substances, okay? And the second part of this presentation will go into a little bit more depth of these kinds of drugs, these synthetic drugs, where they come from, how they're being distributed, and why they are so hard to control. Okay, oops, I'm going backwards here. Okay, this is an example. A lot of things in those packages that you saw in the previous slide have a plant material in them. And sometimes that plant material is a bunch of spices, and sometimes it's just an innocuous type of plant material like parsley or something like that. And there's some herbs in there, but the ones in the K2 packages are being sprayed with a chemical. So it's usually not the plant material itself, but a chemical is being sprayed on the green plant material and then packaged in those packages. And so a lot of times in the lab, we might get the actual chemical in, and it's usually a white powder. And as I said, the next presentation after I get through some of this, will emphasize that all these chemicals, usually start out as a white powder, and then they either cut them with another white powder and put them in capsules, or they put them in a liquid and spray them on a plant material. Okay, so why are these kinds of drugs so bad? And one of the reasons why the drugs are so bad is because the contents of these packages can be completely unpredictable. We can get in a K2 Spice or a Mr. Happy or whatever one time and find a chemical in it, and then the next time we get that same package in, it has something completely different in it. And so therefore, when a person overdoses on it and goes to the hospital has no idea what they have. Even if they said, oh, well, they took a Mr. Happy or they took a clear capsule or it's very hard for the medical community to try to figure out what to do for them and to help get them through the episode. Unfortunately, some of the people do not survive when they go to the hospital because some of these drugs are so potent that if they've taken too much of it, we've had numerous deaths in the Commonwealth and all over the United States from taking these particular drugs. Okay, and the other problem with a lot of these drugs is that the difference between what we could call a therapeutic dose, and I guess you wouldn't say that it was therapeutic because these kinds of drugs are not necessarily helpful in treating any kind of disease or condition. But the difference between the dose that somebody would take to possibly just get high and then come down from the high and go on is the difference between that and the lethal dose sometimes can be so small that I know of a couple of cases over the years where this person was selling capsules of what we call 25 MBOE, and it's a hallucinogen similar to LSD. And the person that was selling them had mixed up his powder and put them in some white capsules and then gave them to some of his friends and sold some of them. And unfortunately, he didn't mix it up really well. And so some capsules had a little bit more in it than other capsules. Well, all the people that left from that party, about the people that took them, about 5 of them wound up in the hospital, and 2 of them did not make it, and 1 of them didn't even make it out of the driveway, and he passed out in his car and died because the difference in the dosage form was so small that just the way he mixed it up killed some people, and some people luckily were able to survive. Okay, so some of the things that these drugs do is they affect the nervous system in such a way that people feel high, they might feel drowsy, they might hallucinate, their perceptions of reality are going to be distorted. A lot of times they start breathing fast, their heart rate might go up, their body temperature might go up. And some of these can cause additional problems the more somebody uses them, and they can do some permanent damage. Okay, these people that are manufacturing and shipping these drugs, they don't care about your child's health or the sanctity of life, but they are making tons of money. And as I said, as I go into a little bit more detail where these drugs are coming from, you'll be able to see that these people are not interested in protecting or helping people. These drugs are sheerly for them to make money. And if you want some additional information about some of these things, you can go on the internet. And there are a lot of good internet sites. One of them is the DEA website, the Justice Department, the Education Department. They all have sites. And usually if you go to a .org site as opposed to a .com site, the .org sites are usually the ones that are the most informative with the correct information. So if you're going to, talk to your children or or talk to not only children, but anyone that is using drugs, you should set a good time to sit down and discuss things with them and cover the subject in little bites so that you have continual conversations with either your friends or cohorts or children, and you can make this a family time, a group time, a friend time, etc. Okay, so this is a really brief overview of trying to describe why these drugs are so dangerous to our community. Okay, and these are some additional resources that you can check out on the internet, especially if you are talking to children, how to prevent drug abuse and treat drug addiction. Okay. All right, let me switch over to one of the other.
Listening to people that are here tonight. The Flatwoods Job Corps have brought some students here. You guys raise your hand, just kind of raise your hand. They have brought a youth play with them along with Edna Brim, who I've been working with a sexual assault response team. They have brought some information regarding sexual assault month, sexual assault prevention month and awareness. And when you all leave this evening, make sure you visit the little table out there, and they've got some things they're going to pass out also. I'm sorry, just thought I'd take that time to recognize them.
All right. So these drugs actually started appearing in like 1999, and we have. The lab started seeing them. Just a brief overview of the forensic lab. There's a Northern Virginia lab, the Western lab where I work, and the Central lab, and then the Eastern lab. This is just a general slide to show you the different kinds of drugs that we're starting to see, and compared to the other drugs that we've had before. The marijuana is still probably the highest incident of drug abuse, but as you can see, the synthetic marijuana is starting to impact even high schoolers. Some of the other drugs that are mentioned here, a lot of them are prescription drugs, the hallucinogens and the ecstasy. And those two drugs can be considered some of these research chemicals or synthetic chemicals also. They would be included in that. You can see too, one of the things that we're starting to see in Southwest Virginia is that heroin is on the rise. And that for some reason, prescription drugs are being heroin is being substituted for some of the prescription drug abuse that we see. One of the reasons I'm mentioning this is that some of the synthetic drugs that we're seeing come in are being cut into the heroin cases. And so we're getting some very dangerous cuts in the heroin that is showing up in the state. These are just things about Okay, some of the other drugs that have been around and are starting to have always sort of impacted us were the MDMA and the ketamine and the dextromethorphan. Those are drugs that have been used in all over the state of Virginia and the United States that we've had problems with. They are pretty much considered to be abused for their hallucinogenic effects. Well, some of the synthetic drugs, what they're doing is they're taking the chemical structure of the MDMA or the ketamine or the dextromethorphan, tweaking it a little bit, and then putting that in the substance and still calling it, like Molly can be MDMA or it can be methadone, which is one of the new synthetic drugs that is out there. Drugs in the state of Virginia are put in various schedules. And Schedule 1 are those drugs that have no medical use in the United States. They're highly abused and highly addictive. Examples of those kinds of drugs would be LSD, psilocin, and heroin. Heroin can come in capsules, powder, packages, and usually it can be smoked, it can be injected, or it can be snorted. And a lot of those times, the heroin itself is dangerous enough, but once they start adding some of the synthetic drugs to it, it makes it even more dangerous. The psilocybin mushrooms, they've been around, and they've actually started creating, one of the chemical in psilocybin mushrooms is psilocin, and they've actually created a synthetic drug to mimic the it's called acetylpsilocin, and that's another one of the drugs that we're starting to see in the Commonwealth, and it's usually sold in little capsules. The mescaline and peyote, they are also listed in the code that they are Schedule 2s. We don't see that many of them. LSD, everybody's heard about this probably in years past, where the LSD is a hallucinogen. It's usually sold on little squares or printed paper. Well, some of these research chemicals or synthetic drugs are now being sold on these kinds of papers. Sometimes when we get LSD papers in, or what we assume to be LSD papers, instead they have the 25 MBOE, or they have some of the new hallucinogens that are out there. So a lot of the things that we used to get now have things that are terribly more potent on them, and nobody knows what they are until we analyze them. Okay, some of the other, then in the state of Virginia, we go down to Schedule 2 drugs, which those are highly addictive drugs. They have high potential for abuse and addiction, but there is a medical use for them in the United States. Codeine is one of them, cocaine, morphine, of course, is a painkiller, methadone, and methamphetamine. Now you might say, what is cocaine for? I didn't think that was what medical use does that have? Well, there is some medical use for it in some surgeries that usually then is only dealt with in the hospital. But all the other ones like codeine, oxycodone, morphine, those are all the painkillers. Well, again, what they've done is they've created synthetic drugs that mimic some of these drugs, and they're putting them in some of these packages and capsules and on papers and things like that. So they're taking the common drugs that we knew before and tweaking them a little bit chemically and creating new dangers for people in the drug abuse community. This is just an example of the different ways that cocaine can be used. It can be smoked, it can be snorted, and of course it can be injected. And methamphetamine. Schedule 3 drugs then are those, as we go further down in the schedules, these are the drugs that have a less problem of dependence, are not as physically addicting as the higher schedule drugs. And examples of some of these are barbiturates and anabolic steroids and some medicines. And the steroids, there is a problem with steroids out there too, because again, they're making synthetic drugs again. They're taking some of the steroids and tweaking them again, and then changing them, selling them out there, and then saying, oh, you know, you don't have to worry about these because they're not illegal, because they're not the substances that people have seen before. We've created something new here. And so there are some dangerous steroids being sold on the internet that are not our regular Schedule III compounds. Buprenorphine is also a Schedule III compound. It's one of the ones that is used for different kinds of addictions. We do see a lot of buprenorphine abuse coming in cases. Schedule IV drugs then are the ones that are, again, lowering potential for abuse and addiction. Examples of a lot of Schedule IV drugs are usually your antidepressants, diazepam, alprazolam, and lorazepam. And again, believe it or not, they're making synthetic copies of some of these drugs, selling them on the internet, and causing problems. This is just an example of what an alprazolam tablet might look like. Oops. The diazepam tablets, etc. Some of these look alike, or some of these synthetic tranquilizers are sometimes made to look like the original pill, but they're usually not as polished, they're usually not made as well, and usually they're sold on the internet, or somebody would be selling them like hand to hand. Schedule V drugs are then those that are just drugs that you can buy at the pharmacy that you can sign for. A lot of them are like cough medicines and things like that. And then Schedule VI drugs are the ones that your doctor usually prescribes for you. You know, your antibiotics, your blood pressure medicines, and things like that. What we're seeing, though, is that the drugs 1 through 4 are the ones that they're copying and making synthetic, similar substances to. Okay. This is just for the pill references. If anyone ever has a pill and they need to know what it might be, there's always the drug Bible, which a lot of law enforcement agencies have, and there's also something on the internet called Pillbox, pillbox.com, and you can type in the description of the pill, and then it will tell you what is in that particular pill. And if more than likely you can't find it on one of these sites, then it might be synthetic, or it might not be what it's supposed to be, because the markings usually are very consistent and should tell you what the pill, what is in the pill. And so I guess the other thing you could always do is if you have an unknown pill that you are concerned about what it may be, you can always take it to the pharmacist too and ask them to look it up for you. The other one too, there's another one out there called drugs.com, and it will also give you information about pill identifiers and medications and things like that. Marijuana is still a big problem in Virginia and the United States, and it's not scheduled per se. It is controlled, but it's not in the Schedules 1 through 6 because it's not considered a medication per se. It is a drug. And we see it still in plant material form, buds. There's all kinds of different kinds and different varieties of marijuana out there. And with all the legalized marijuana in Colorado, there is a lot of prepackaged, what looks like commercially packaged marijuana being sold, and they have all different varieties now. So, the other thing that we're seeing out on the internet is the hash oil, or the butane honey oil. We're seeing a lot of that being sold on the internet. There's a lot of commercially packaged hash oil foods and components that are being sold out of Colorado. The problems with a lot of these is that they're not being regulated and people are taking way too much of them. And so, as never known before, there are actually overdoses on THC and consuming too many cannabinoids. Okay. There's other kinds of, that butane honey oil then can be formed into all of these kinds of drugs. It's called shatter and just different street names for them. And some of the other trends is that some of them are being made into cookies and lollipops and candy. And again, some of this stuff is coming out of California and it's also coming out of Colorado. Because both of those states have a more liberalized marijuana laws. And some of these, as I said before, are dangerous because people think, oh, well, it's just a cookie, so I'll just have a couple of them. And then they're actually having some overdoses on THC now. But it's not just the pot and the crack anymore. And as I said, we all kind of heard from movies and just reading and newscasts about marijuana and coke and methamphetamine and some hallucinogens. But now we are starting to see and have been seeing for about 5 years, I guess, but it's escalated in the past 2 years. We're starting to see these, what we call synthetic cannabinoids. Those are the first ones that started coming out. They took a chemical that was similar to THC, which is the ingredient in marijuana, which gives the hallucinogenic type effects. And they took that chemical structure and tweaked it a little bit. And in tweaking it, they created something that was similar to the THC, but had different effects. A lot of times they were stronger. A lot of times you could use less of the drug to get the same effect, but people didn't know that. The next things that started to come out were what we call research chemicals or bath salts, because they were sold under the name of bath salts. They were literally put in packages that said that they were bath salts, that they were not for human consumption, and that they were also sold as plant food, disc cleaner, all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally think would be drugs. So you'd say, well, how would people know then to use these things as drugs? Because they're being sold as incense and stuff, and they actually say not for human consumption on them. Well, we have the internet to thank for that. Because the internet told people that these things were really drugs, and that what they could do if you took them. That, oh, they make you high, oh, they do this, oh, they do that, oh, I had a great high, I had a bad high. There are trip reports on the internet, and it's amazing to me that people would read these trip reports and then want to try this stuff, because a lot of the trip reports were, oh, I was sick after that, oh, I had a headache for 4 days after that, oh, I couldn't think straight. But, so next time I think maybe I'll just try a higher dose. And I was like, why would people do that? But that's where the whole phenomenon started, was that the internet explained to people in the know, in the underground of the internet, that these things were really drugs. And that's why it took the police department and the forensic lab by surprise. Because we were like, why would anybody take this stuff? Why would anybody use it that way? Okay, so the cannabinoid agents that, and you saw some of the pictures, they are put in these packages, and a lot of times they are sealed up. They look like a package of something that could be candy or could be an incense, because a lot of them, they have put a smell into them. They smell like strawberries, they smell like blueberries, and a lot of times the plant material that's in there is just an innocuous plant material. The plant material has nothing to do with the effect of why people are taking them. Because what has happened is the drug that has been created has been put into water, sprayed on these plant materials, and then people are usually smoking the plant material. The plant material, again, in these packages, when you look at them, they'll be labeled as K2 or Spice or Zombie Mariner or Scooby Snacks or Mercedes-Benz or High Trip, or there's millions of different names of them. But they're usually in the Mylar packages, and it's an herbal blend that has the chemical sprayed on it. And as you can see, this is one of the ones, and it'll say on the back, this is an aromatic potpourri herbal blend, and it contains a combination of aromatic potpourri, spices, etc. The product is not designed for human consumption. And then it says what the ingredients are, but they failed to list that there's another chemical in there. And the reason they use the words not for human consumption is in the federal law, when it says what is controlled in the United States as a Schedule 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, one of the descriptions in the federal law is that if something says it's not for human consumption, that's okay then, because somebody could make a chemical, and it could truly be, as an incense, it could truly be as a disc cleaner or a bath salt. And as long as it says not for human consumption on it, it was okay. Plus, they have a strict, the FDA has a strict process that a drug company has to go through in order to create a new drug. And what they usually do is they take a structure and they tweak it a little bit, and then they will do some computerized testing on it, and then they may decide that they're going to go further on in that testing, but usually at that point they go ahead and put a patent on it. And then they might even take it where they try it on petri dishes and cell cultures, and then on animals, and then maybe on humans. Again, this is just packaging, and you can see the aromatic product, and the packaging looked pretty official. The thing was, when a lot of these first came out, they were legal. You might say, well, how can they be legal if they're drugs, if they're dangerous drugs? The reason was because things that are listed in Schedule 1 through 5 are actually listed by their chemical name. So in other words, it says diacetylmorphine, it says cocaine, it says methamphetamine. So if you take that structure and tweak it a little bit and add something else, it's not that chemical anymore. So it's not illegal. But that does not make it safe, and it does not make it usable. And somebody in China figured this out. And what they're doing, this is all the packaging again, and it is marketed to young people, but they are creating these drugs mostly in China, but some in Southeast Asia, and they are selling them on the internet. And they are actually saying that this is this drug or this drug. And they'll even say, this is for research purposes only, and it's not for human consumption. But they will sell it by the kilo to a lot of people, and early on, all this stuff was not illegal. And that was the problem. But how could we make something illegal if we don't know what it is? And where they were getting this information is from old patents that are on the internet. They're getting them from research papers and colleges that did research, and then said, now this stuff isn't going to work, or no, it might be too dangerous, and they just shoved it away. But these people are making these chemicals, selling them on the internet, and they have created huge markets where people will go out and buy these things on the internet, and then they dilute them, spray them on plant material, and they do the packaging here then. They create those little Mylar packages and package them. You can see some of the pictures, you can see some of the things that they call them. Sometimes they actually sell the white powders, but they put them still in official looking packaging. Okay. Now, I don't want to get anybody, chemistry, I want to do chemistry, please. But what they're doing is, let's say, let me go on to another one. These are all hallucinogens, and these are all synthetic drugs that have come in. Okay, where's my? Well, maybe we go back to this. If you can see this just as a picture, like if you were looking at a structure for a house, and this was part of your plans for the structure, you can see that this compound is almost the same as this compound. You're just adding this circle over here and making this line a little bit longer. And that's what they're doing. They're taking the basic structure of a chemical compound like fentanyl, like cocaine, like THC, and just adding one little thing to it. It becomes a different chemical, which a lot of times increases the potency and may even increase the addiction potential or the abuse potential of the drug. And that's why heroin, is it heroin or is it fentanyl? Well, fentanyl is an actual pharmaceutical drug, but some of the fentanyl analogs which they are making, there's one that's just come out and they usually hit Europe first. It makes the heroin about 100 times more potent. So if somebody uses it, they could be gone in about 10 minutes. So it wouldn't take long for somebody, even if they're a first-time user, or even if they're a long-time user of heroin, to overdose on it. Some of the other compound trends, again, are the LSD. There's different kinds of hallucinogens. Is it LSD or is it the 25 MBOE? And you might say, well, what are all these crazy names and stuff? Well, we call them alphabet soup at the lab because they're constantly, first we started getting 25 MBOE in, then we got 25B MBOE, then we got 25C MBOE, and so they were constantly just tweaking it. And every time something comes in like this, the forensic lab then tells the legislature, and we inform DEA that we're getting it in, and then they go ahead and put it in a controlled substances list and make it illegal. And when they do that, then that 25 MBOE is now illegal. But then when 25C came out, it wasn't illegal until we got enough of it in, so it was probably 6 months into coming into the United States, and then it had to go through the legal process and be put into Schedule 1. So if somebody was caught with 25C, it wasn't illegal. And that's kind of the problem here, is that they're always one step ahead of us all. And so that's why it's so frustrating for the forensic people, for the law enforcement people, to try to control this stuff. Because they're always one step ahead of us. And you might say, well, why can't we just come up with a law that says all this stuff is illegal? Well, we don't know what it is until they make it. So how can you make something illegal until they make it? And then you don't know what it is until a lot of people get it and test it. And unfortunately, a lot of these drugs, we're getting some ketamine in. Ketamine is an animal tranquilizer, but they're substituting that again. The designer tranquilizers are coming in. We're getting things that are like diazepam and alprazolam, but slightly different. And you can kind of see all that it is starting to show up in all the statistics with all these drugs. The emergency room visits are starting to skyrocket, and everybody's frustrated. And the biggest thing is we can't do that much about it because we're kind of always chasing our tail. And what makes these drugs so dangerous is that we can't, if they're not illegal, it's hard to stop them. And there's so much money making these things and keeping them, and spreading them out there. And as soon as we make one illegal, I think it takes about 6 months and we start seeing something completely new again. And it's a lot of work. So that's why it's so important for all of you to educate people and to talk to people and to talk to young folks and say, this stuff is more dangerous than any of the stuff we've ever seen before. Because this stuff is not going through the FDA process. It is being made in China by people who don't care, who couldn't care less, who are making batches of these powders, selling them on the internet to other people, who are then spraying them on these plant materials and putting them in capsules and everything else. And people get the false impression that this stuff is not dangerous because it's legal. But just because it's legal doesn't make it safe. And everybody expects the government to try to take care of them. Well, we're trying as best we can. We are trying to stop these people, but we can't because they're always one step ahead of us. And that's why it's so important for everybody to realize how dangerous all these chemicals are, because the people that are using them are guinea pigs. They are literally the guinea pigs and the first people taking a lot of this stuff. We have no idea whether it's going to kill their kidneys, whether the first time they use it, it's going to kill them, whether it's going to do permanent brain damage, whether the first time they take it, it raises their body temperature so much that they die from over temperature, or I forget what you call that, but their body temperature rises, or their heart starts beating so fast that when they get to the emergency room doctors can't stop their heart beating so fast because they don't know what they've taken. And until we figure out a process to make this illegal, it's going to be hard to stop it. And that's why, again, it is so important for the community to understand how dangerous these drugs are and to spread the word that this stuff isn't safe and it is very, very dangerous. And you're playing Russian roulette if somebody uses it. And people that are selling it sometimes don't know how dangerous this stuff is. Because they think, oh, well, you know, this is a legal high, and it can't be that bad, you know, must be like drinking too much coffee or something. But, again, a lot of these drugs are being, the framework is from morphine. So if you tweak it a little bit, you're taking morphine and usually making it more potent, more addictive, and unpredictable. So that's why, again, it is so very important for people to understand how dangerous this stuff is. And to get the word out that don't use this stuff. Just because some of it says it's a legal high, it may or may not be, because, as I said, we are trying to make this stuff illegal as fast as we can identify it. But we're changing it as fast as we identify it. So this is an example of a sin can that came out, but it took like 2 or 3 years for them to come out to say that people that use this now have acute kidney injury. Well, that's because it's never been tested. The FDA did not approve these drugs. They did not go through the testing process. So again, what is the compound? Every time they change them, they might use the same packaging. So, and the people that are making these drugs, they don't know how strong they're making them. They don't know what the effects are going to be. As you can see, there's all kinds of effects on there, and most of them aren't good. But we don't know which one of these effects would be, because you really don't know which chemical it is. These are some of the effects. These are some of the examples of how they change the structure by adding different things. Another example of the pictures of them. As you can see, this one we made illegal, and so what did they do? They changed it here. And they rearranged and added an oxygen there, and they just tweaked it a little bit. AM2201 was illegal. The next one that came out was NM2201. That one wasn't illegal. Now it is illegal. These are the trends. These are some of the new ones coming out. And we made all the ones in this slide illegal, but then they came out with these. And as you can see, we call them alphabet soup, as I said before. And this is an example again. This one was made illegal in, I think it was last December. This one is not illegal at this time, but it's going to be added July 1st, I think. So they're just tweaking it a little bit to change it. And as I said, just because it's legal doesn't make it safe. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you. Okay. That's it.
Is there a video?
We can show them a video on somebody on EFI on, I know I ran probably a little late. I can do it.
Why don't we do this? How about we do this? I know that everybody would love to see this video, and I know that there's probably, is there a link to it?
Yeah, I can probably look it up, or I can go back to that slide and see if I can find that slide. It was YouTube, players YouTube. Well, I guess that's the link.
Technology.
Yeah.
Everybody knows technology.
Yeah.
Hey, let's all thank the doctor first of all. Now, let me give you an example of you see the frustration that law enforcement is feeling with some of these substances, and I know y'all probably, I saw some of you shaking your head with the discussion of you change an oxygen here and you move it there, and then it's suddenly illegal goes to legal. One thing that has happened, you know how long it takes Congress to do something, right? To get the government to do something, right? Well, one thing that has fortunately happened is we have now laws on the books that allow us to prosecute people for imitation substances. So if someone has an imitation of a certain substance, if it's designed to imitate the effects of another drug, even though it isn't technically illegal under the scheduling rules, it is illegal because it is a imitation of something. And we've got one case right now pending in our court that we're working on that is a imitation case. And so those are some of the developments in the law. We're trying to tackle this. We're trying to get ahead of it. And fortunately, the legislature has gone and taken that step to make it possible for us to make cases on imitation drugs. And you'll see a few years ago that there were these packages proudly displayed in gas stations. I don't know if any of y'all have stopped at gas stations. You've seen it. Hopefully those are gone. Those days are gone. That those are gone off the shelves. Because we're going after it. And we're saying to the public, we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to prosecute it. And you're going to have a very lengthy prison sentence if we catch you distributing these drugs. And you know, we want to take it off the street. But the only way we can do that, and I see James Lane, the City of Norton Police Chief in the other room, Chief Lane always reminds me that we can't, as law enforcement, we can't do our job without the public giving us tips and information. And we want to give credit to those who call frequently in and say, this is going on in my community. And I heard it while traveling around campaigning last year. People say, down the street there's a drug house. Down the street there's this going on. We've got to get that information. We've got to get that information so that we can get the undercover agents in there and put a stop to it. So if you know the local drug dealer down the street, you got an address, send a tip in. Make sure they know it. We've got to have that information so that we can stop it. All right, I'm going to pause for a second and open it up for questions. If you've got questions for me or the Sheriff's Department, Russ, fantastic. Let me introduce Captain Russ Cypress with the Wise County Sheriff's Department. Russ is out here in the forefront. Of course, we had introductions earlier. Most of the Sheriff's Department. Russ has been working all day. So, Russ, thank you for being with us. Make him welcome. You may have questions for us specifically, or you just want to vent. Does anyone? Yes, Dave.
Chuck, I've got a question for the doctor. physiology of these substances so their marketing is potpourri, for instance, and so a lot of, like in the old school worry, like with marijuana and such, with residual in the air and that sort of thing, these substances have these chemicals on that. If someone who were accidentally exposed by something being burned or tactile touching said packet contents, is there anything that happens that can be dangerous to the person that handles that, much like what our police officers know with meth labs and such, where they're having to do with special handling requirements?
Yeah, there could be, because some of these drugs, like I said, it can, like a K2 can have one, it might have the MDOE on it. Well, the MDOE can be absorbed through the fingers or the skin, and just a little bit of it can be very, very, and well, it can be lethal. Where if it was one of the synthetic marijuanas, it may not be as dangerous, and it wouldn't be absorbed through the skin. So it just depends on which one is on there. And because, like I said, most of these chemicals that they put on this stuff has never been tested anywhere. They were just research papers or papers in colleges or by pharmaceutical companies. And they were never actually made or tested because they figured they were either too dangerous or they wouldn't be helpful, and they just bagged the research on those going in that direction. Well, like I said, somebody in China then has decided to make this stuff. It's never been tested on anybody. So really, nobody knows what the actual effect, the danger, or the long-term effects of any of this stuff is. It's never been tested.
I wish Teresa was in here.
I'm here.
Oh, Teresa told a story about going in where folks were smoking and got a headache, like none
Yeah,
of it.
we had the open smoke raid, and I just happened to go to one of the search warrants, and I don't know if anybody else went to any. I know Lieutenant Sanders was with me on the one we went to, and when we went in, we started a search warrant, the lady was smoking the stuff, and the smell was a sweet sort of smell, and I can't stand cigarette smells because it bothers me, growing up with parents that smoke, and it ended up giving me headaches, but this was different, and it was an instant migraine headache, and we had to open all the windows and put fans to clear it out, and had to stand outside for an hour before we could go in and conduct our search warrant. And then we had to be handling the stuff. It was in baggies, we had gloves on, but we were packaging, we had to inventory everything, take photographs. We were there for almost 6 hours, just inventorying all those items. And I went to bed with a headache, woke up the next morning with a headache. And, I was not exposed to it that long. But, people are smoking this and around their children. And, in their homes with them, their children are smelling this. So we know the cause of secondary smoke for cigarettes. You can just imagine what the secondary smoke is for individuals smoking this stuff.
And the General Assembly here in Virginia, I don't know if y'all saw, just there's a bill that would make it illegal to smoke in a car with a child present. You think about the effects of tobacco. This is potent. And I said, Boy Scout troop here. I'm glad they're here. You got to stay away from this. It will ruin your life. But these poor kids who don't have a prayer, their parents are doing it around them. We've got to, as a community, reach out with compassion to these addicts and give them another option. And I see Jeff Rowland here from Camp Bethel. That's an example. We got to get addicts plugged in to rehabilitation and give them a purpose, a job, something to do to get off and away from it. The problem is that once they get started on the synthetic drugs, there's almost no going back to a certain degree. It changes the brain chemistry, and we've got to stop it before it happens. All right. Sorry, we've all talked. Another question? Yeah.
Your statistics, Doctor, they're pretty alarming. And I was wondering, I'm assuming they were national statistics. Are there any statistics available broken down to states and regions as far as the one that caught my eye was 1 in 9 seniors have said
do cases from all over the country. We do have some statistics on some of these things, which I have in my presentation for tomorrow. But it is kind of amazing because this synthetic drug problem is all over the United States. It's in Canada, it's in Europe, and it's in Australia. And it usually comes to Europe first. And so luckily, we get their experience because we're all talking with each other going, okay, what's coming next? But it is kind of amazing that the statistics are about the same for, in other words, a big metropolitan area usually is having about the same statistics as other metropolitan areas. And then some of the smaller country areas are, you know, they all have the same statistics. So these would be very similar.
My reason for asking that is, it seems like in our area, we have such a tremendous prescription drug abuse. And I'm wondering what the comparison is as to a prescription drug abusers now reaching out to the synthetic drug abuse. And we have a large disabled population, which a lot of that situation has caused drug abuse issues. And it seems like those numbers are higher in our region than they are in other states. So,
Part of that is true. What I remember of the statistics in Northern Virginia and Western Virginia are our highest statistics for synthetic drug abuse. But some of the other drug abuses in the other parts of the state kind of balance that off because it's just, I guess you could say it's just as bad to be addicted to heroin or methamphetamine or using LSD as it is using some of these things, except some of these things are more potent than those original drugs. So either way, it's not a good situation.
Can I add a little something to the question there? And Monty Sayers, he's with our housing authority, and I just want you all to know that the sheriff's office works close in hand with the housing authority. If they have a drug problem, they notify us and we act on it. But if we respond to the housing authority property and there's a drug issue there, we do a thing called bar somebody. We'll bar that person from being on the property the first time if they're causing a problem. If they're back on the property, they're charged with trespassing, that's a criminal charge. But we work hand in hand with him. But talking about the area and regionally, I spoke with the Attorney General with the Attorney General's office that's going to be coming tomorrow and speak with us. He's with one of the U.S. Attorney Generals out of Greenville. He's coming tomorrow, but also our drug task force people have talked to me about this, that Wise County, and particularly Riverview area in Coburn, is considered a drug hub for synthetic narcotics and gravel. Gravel is a very powerful synthetic that is used. It's got the synthetic narcotics mixed in with other drugs or mixed in with it, and gravel, you can kind of go into the details about that. But that is so scary. You know, the Riverview area of Coburn is considered a drug hub of the southwest region. And actually the south area of Tennessee, all that, it's considered, you know, a drug hub. And we need to think about that. We need to think about that. You might want to tell them a little bit about gravel, and it's very popular in this area now. Our drug task force person said these people that are selling gravel are very paranoid. They always have guns. So they're paranoid from other dealers, they're paranoid from somebody buying drugs from them, so they always have a gun on them. So you all, you know, you hear somebody dealing gravel, it's not a good thing, and it is in our area. One thing that I just, as a neighborhood watch person, I started neighborhood watches, deal with crime prevention. People need to do things, you know, to look out for their neighbors. They need to lock their doors, their house doors, their car doors. If they can, lock up their medications and put them where they're safe, especially if you've got children in the home. You just don't want somebody to get a hold of your medication. You don't advertise that you're going out of town. You don't, those types of things. Needless to say, You can go to the grocery store and your house get broken into, but you need to be aware of that. If you can get an alarm system, it's important that you have one. If you can, whatever you can. But you all need to understand that these people are in our neighborhoods, and it's just not the local people causing the problem. There's people coming from out of state, from Tennessee, or from Kentucky, or North Carolina, or Florida, wherever they're from, and we're having issues. We've had a couple home invasions lately. One home invasion that shots were fired in the home, and we're still looking for suspects in that case. So you all need to be aware of that too. I'm sorry, didn't mean to
All right,
interrupt.
that's okay.
Gravel.
Well, and I just wanted,
Discussion on gravel, and then I'll go to you.
Is this something that will possibly come to an end, or is it, is it just, they're gonna keep tweaking it to where we would never get a hold of it, or?
well, we are trying to come up with, and I say we because sometimes they're, the British government, the United States government, the DEA, and some of the European governments are trying to get together and trying to come up with legislation that will cover more of these things more broadly. And we're coming up with recommendations saying, we'll give you a list of over 10,000 of possibilities of what could be done, and maybe then we could get one step ahead of these people finally. But again, because it's a legislative process and it's a legal process, we're not sure if then somebody will find a loophole in that too. But right now, it is kind of a continuing process, and that's what makes it so dangerous, because we don't know what they're doing. The last email I got last week was that there's an M18 coming out there, and it's 100 more times more potent than fentanyl. Well, fentanyl is 100 more times more potent than morphine, and we all know how potent morphine is, and then fentanyl's even that, and then this stuff, the newest synthetic that's out there, is even 100 times more potent than that. And so just a little bit, it could kill somebody. And we've had a number of cases where that has happened, so, just,
Question.
oh, go ahead.
Question, Mike?
Okay, I live in Wise, and I have a business. I'm also a foster parent. My biggest concern is that they're being returned to this. They're coming to us, and unless you've been there, you really have no idea what you're dealing with a drug addicted child. I have 4 that we've adopted. Willing to take more, but they're going back into this, and so what they're doing, and then they're aging out. So it's a vicious cycle, because a lot of these kids are returning back to their parents. After so they're being taken out again. I've had the same child 3 or 4 times. Why are they keep continuing when there's still drugs?
First off, thank you for being a foster parent. And sharing your home, your love to these kids. My parents have foster kids, and I've got a new brother and sister they just adopted, and I'm thrilled. We need more foster parents. First off, let me do a pitch for foster care. We've got a huge number of kids in foster care coming from Coburn, coming from Big Stone, but yet the number of foster homes available is appalling. And shame on the community for not being willing to open their doors to these kids who are hurting, who are desperate for someone to love them and to care for them and to provide a safe, stable home. We all ought to be raising our hand and saying, what can I do to take on that kid? First and foremost, I encourage anybody to go out and become a foster parent and to open your doors to these kids that need it, because the need is so great. Yesterday, I got to wear a different hat. The Department of Social Services attorney had a conflict and he had to be somewhere else, and I stepped in and said, you know what, I'll represent DSS today and help. And it's so sad when you look at these cases. Before I became Commonwealth attorney, I worked representing kids who've been abused and neglected. And the need is so great. We've got to do more. That's why taking this program to the public and making sure that we're educating the public about the dangers of drug abuse, of how just having a child in the room with this smoke can affect the child. When you're talking about kids that are drug addicted or drug exposed, and it affects their ability to learn, it affects their ability to earn a living in the future, and it affects their ability to become a upstanding member of society.
There's no way these kids are not affected.
Right. You're exactly
I don't care who they are, there's no
And
perfect child.
And then the other part of that is, you know, we all say, yeah, I'd love to take on a foster child, but I don't have room in my home, or I want a little one, I want a newborn, or a 1 or 2 year old. It's the kids, as you alluded to, that are 16, 17, that are about to age out of the foster care system, who have no home to go to on Thanksgiving, no home to go to on Christmas, nowhere, no moral compass for them to look to, no one to take them to church on Sunday. These are the folks, the kids that need it the most. Of course, all kids need it. Little babies need a safe place too. But these teenagers, if we don't do something, if we don't get help with them, they're going to be in the prison system. So thank you for saying all those words and reaching out. I appreciate it. I'm going to go in the back and then, yeah.
Okay, I got a question. I know a couple of people that were busted by our law enforcement for crack.
Yeah.
And then they get in these clinics, and it seems like they stay in these clinics. And they stay, and they stay, and they stay. So they're getting a dose of something that's supposed to be helping get them off of this. What's the time frame on this?
Well,
Can I follow up with that?
Yeah,
That's a very good question. I wanted to ask that question to the doctor. I hear of a lot of abuse with Suboxone. I heard you mention Suboxone. Now, there used to be methadone clinics.
Right.
And I think there's fewer of those, and now I hear of Suboxone. And now that Suboxone is what are abusers doing with the Suboxone drug? That's an issue that
Yeah,
I've seen.
supposedly, I'm not an expert on that, and by the way, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a doctor. I've got a bachelor's degree in chemistry, so I've been analyzing drugs for 35 years, but I am not a PhD. But some of the clinics, I know, the methadone replacement, why they used methadone was that it helped to slowly take people off being addicted to heroin or oxycodone. And the same thing, buprenorphine or Suboxone is supposed to do the same thing.
Back out this way and kind of give each other a little space, and if you want to talk to some individuals, you can.
Last thing I'll say as we close, pay attention to the sheriff's Facebook page, also my Facebook page or Twitter or chuckslemp.com as to where we're going to have these community forums in the future. And if you want us to come to your church, email us, or your civic center or whatever it may be, email us. Thank you all.
See you later.
I might can. I'll ask her. Well, actually, it's not.
That's actually synthetic.
Thank you for coming.
That's actually synthetic marijuana that they've actually mixed up themselves. They bought the chemicals, they bought the plant material, and they put it together themselves. And people try to smoke it. And that's the stuff that they're talking about in there.